While some online bullion dealers continue to charge almost $4 over spot for U.S. Mint Silver Eagles, SD Bullion is selling 2017 Silver Eagles for just $2.29 over spot on any quantity. Again, that's just $2.29 over spot for any quantity. If you haven't joined the over 40,000 precious metals investors by making the switch to SD Bullion, what are you waiting for? You could save hundreds or even thousands of dollars on your next order. SD Bullion, the lowest prices, period.
Basically, they have about $2 billion cash, and they're burning $75 billion, a month. That's the federal burn rate. So right around June 1st, they're going to be out of money. And this thing is coming into law on March 15th. That's it. It's capped.
Hey friends, thanks so much for tuning in. I'm very glad to have back on the line Lior Gantz. He's the founder of Wealth Research Group. We've had him on once before. Boy, I'll tell you what, guys, I've never seen so many things happening so quickly. Yesterday, Vault 7 was released by WikiLeaks, revealing so much about the nefarious activities of the CIA. On the back of that, we have Obamagate breaking wide open, which I think could lead Obama himself directly to prison if things go our way. Lior, there is so much to talk about, and we haven't even covered gold, silver, or Bitcoin. How are you?
I'm good. What's going on?
There's a lot going on. In fact, so much is going on, it's getting very, very hard to track it all and to keep up on all of it. And on the back of all that, we have the Pizzagate, Petagate scandals. I'll tell you what, I've never seen so much truth spill out as quickly as we're seeing it happen here in 2017, which reminds me of my friend Bill Holter, who I had on not too long ago, and he said 2017 would be the year of the truth bomb.
Sure. Look, the elections have made it so that people inside of government have more to fear because the administration itself is much more open with the with what they're doing, because what they're doing is it's the populist vote, right? In France, in the 7th of May, there's going to be an elections, and basically Trump's counterpart over there, the more populist vote, she's gaining in polls, and what she wants to do is exactly what Trump does. It's closing down the borders, making sure that the illegal aliens do not disrupt the country. In France, it's horrible right now. I've been there about 9 months ago, and it was you can't even recognize Paris because it's changed so much. And all of this is causing what's called peak globalization, basically. World trade is going down substantially, and every time that has happened, a recession has proceeded in the United States. So there's a lot going on, and if she wins in France, they're probably going to exit the European Union, right, which will change Europe political map for good. That's it.
Yep. Yeah, you're right. They're trying to demonize Marine Le Pen just like they tried to demonize Trump. And I think that people are wising up, just as they did here in this country. What did Trump want to do? He wanted to have a legal immigration policy backed by rule of law. What does Marine Le Pen want to do? She wants to cap immigration at 10,000 people a year. That seems like common sense, especially if you're living in Paris and you've had to survive this onslaught of refugees that are literally flooding the streets. Lior, I mean, it's just out of control. And so what I think we're seeing here right now is a revelation of the deep state, which is in this country exemplified by Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Bush, the Bush family. Why do I say that? Because Bush used to be the senior director of the CIA. Who created Obama? The CIA. What is Obama doing right now? Well, he just had Valerie Jarrett move into his $5 million mansion in Washington, D.C., where they can try to topple Trump. So I think this stuff is all being laid bare for people of the world to see. It's the deep state that is opposed to humanity.
Yeah, I'll tell you what else. This polarization in Washington is really showing the weakness of the United States to the aspiring empires, China and Russia. And, they're dumping treasuries. This is outright war, basically, between the United States in China and Russia, because obviously in a fiat monetary system, you're living in a debt cycle. You're either the debtor or the creditor, right? And so if what they're doing is they're switching from their 30-year bonds to 10-year bonds, then from 10-year bonds to 2-year bonds, and they're basically making the United States government their slave. You can't fund, you can't fund the federal budget, the entitlements programs, and anything without the largest creditor nations allowing this to happen. And this is exactly what's going on right now. They're switching from dumping treasuries at a record rate. Basically, in the last 2 years, they've sold more than they bought. Japan, which is the second largest creditor, they switch around all the time between China and Japan. They're dumping treasuries as well. They're moving into gold. Russia and China both are buying mega shipments of gold, and they're switching to their own currencies. This is basically a move on the global reserve currency, which is the U.S. dollar. And I think this is happening because, like you said, the people are waking up and they're seeing that there's fracks all over the political landscape of the United States, which was all elite for 30 years. They can break that wall.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. China dumping treasuries at a record pace is something that is really the death knell for the dollar eventually. We keep saying eventually, but now look, we are coming up against this debt ceiling again in this country, and I'm not exactly sure. I guess what they'll just do is they'll raise the debt ceiling again, Lior, but your point's a good one. How can they do that in perpetuity when there's no longer a buyer of 30-year bonds? How are they going to fund this government, which continues to print money hand over fist in perpetuity?
Well, they can't do it in perpetuity. What's going to basically, they have about $2 billion cash, and they're burning $75 billion a month. That's the federal burn rate. So right around June 1st, they're going to be out of money, and this thing is coming into law on March 15th. This is basically law. That's it. It's capped at $20 billion. So they can't raise that debt ceiling unless they actually vote on it. Now you tell me, is this not the perfect opportunity for the establishment, for the people who didn't want Donald Trump in there, shaking things up? Is this not the perfect chance to blame this as the fall guy for the last 30 years of mismanaging the country's balance, doing everything and anything? This is a great opportunity for them to do exactly that. And I think that's part of the reason why we're seeing foreign governments leaving the petrodollar trade that's been around forever.
You might be right, but let me provide a counter argument to that. The criminal banks, which control the Federal Reserve System and essentially created the intelligence agencies, so really the criminal banks are the deep state at the bottom of the rabbit hole. These criminal banks cannot afford to let the dollar die, right? Because if they do that, the derivatives bubble will explode and down will go Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo. These criminal banks will topple. HSBC, by the way, former home of James Comey. Guys, if you want to know why James Comey isn't being honest with the president, you want to know why James Comey isn't going after any of these Pizzagate criminals, it's because James Comey used to be at HSBC, home of drug trafficking money and one of the most criminal banks on planet Earth. Lior, my point is that I don't think the deep state can allow this system to fall. If this system falls, if the petrodollar system falls, down goes the deep state.
Sure. Look, the idea here is not that the world reserve currency and this entire system is going to fall within the next few months. The major challenge here is that the system is unraveling. They need to adapt. They need to change. They need to use the corporate media to convince the people of what they're doing, under the radar. And this is getting harder and harder in 2017 because everything is getting global and everything is getting so out in the open, and there's leaks all the time. So this is definitely a different type of mentality that they are trying to adapt to. And obviously the elections didn't go their way. and it looks like Trump is getting a lot of traction with the people, and that's really the problem for them. He's very popular right now. The stock market is moving up. It's just the Dow Jones, for instance, it just did its fastest 1,000 point move up in history. It's been up 12 days in a row in the month of February. That hasn't happened since 1987. You know what happened in 1987, obviously. And it's very hard to dethrone a president when the stock market is doing so well, when people are thinking that the infrastructure plan is going to come and raise high-paying jobs, and they're having trouble with unleashing what they want and getting this president out of the way. It's complex, is what I'm saying to you.
Yeah, it most certainly is. And with $20 trillion in debt and this debt ceiling, right around the corner as we're having this conversation, we're about to hit the debt ceiling. What are your thoughts on gold, silver, and Bitcoin? Because I think gold and silver, if they weren't manipulated, would be doing the same thing Bitcoin is doing, right? Because Bitcoin is at this point the canary in the coal mine that's telling us that all of the world's fiat currencies are sick. Most of them are dying, and that includes the dollar. So what's your opinion on what's going? Let's start with Bitcoin. What's your opinion on Bitcoin? What is Bitcoin telling us?
First of all, for the past 5 years, central banks have been net buyers of gold. And I think what's going on in the world today is that people are having a much easier and simpler time buying Bitcoins than buying physical gold. You don't have to store it. You don't have to watch it. It's not a physical delivery. It's a much more liquid way of protecting yourself. And that's why I think many people go into Bitcoin instead of gold. Obviously, there's a lot of other advantages to it. It's electronic. It's utterly impossible to track, right? And so it's moving up and it's moving up for the right reasons. People are afraid. People want their privacy. I don't need to reiterate the reasons to diversify out of fiat currencies into Bitcoins. For silver and gold, here's my thinking. Central banks are buying a lot of gold. And silver, as opposed to gold, has two main functions. First of all, it's a monetary metal, and investment. People buy it for investment all the time. There's many shortages around the world in the silver market, and the idea behind it is that it's also an industrial metal. So in 2017, I can easily see it reaching about 60-1 at the ratio with gold. That means it will end the year about $25, $29 per ounce. And because so many mining companies have been frugal over the last 5-6 years, mining shares silver mining shares specifically could really become exceptionally profitable. But I'll tell you the big thing here. For the last 6 years, the big banks have been bearish on commodities. They've opened up the largest short position on silver. I mean, Wealth Research Group, we did an entire micro documentary on the silver rigging. You can go to wealthresearchgroup.com/silver rigging and see the entire 5-minute micro documentary. And the idea is simple. The mining companies, the large mining companies, BHP Bullion and Rio Tinto, for the first time in 6-7 years, they've become profitable. They now make money instead of losing money. They're going to buy these small companies up because they need to change their depleting mines and get into new mines, and this entire industry can go up. Not only that, but Europe and China are moving out of a very rough environment that they've suffered for the last 5-6 years, and their PMI, their Purchasing Managers Index, is surging up. By the way, the U.S. as well. And Sean, if you remember, Bernanke, not Yellen, Bernanke, back in the day, he said, look, we have this under control. When push comes to shove, when it comes down to it, we'll tame inflation once it's creeping up. And I'm telling you, that moment is here. And now you're going to see that it's not easy to tame inflation. It's the power back of this inflation is global. The U.S. or the Federal Reserve Bank, it's absolutely ludicrous that they would think they can just halt it by raising rates. What's going on today is inflation is rising. They're trying to raise rates, which is horrible for the economy, by the way. The Fed has raised rates 13 times since World War II. Not 13 times, but 13 periods of tightening. 10 out of the 13 have immediately caused a recession. In the year that they started to tighten, and this is they tightened for the first time in 2015 in December, a second time in 2016 December. If they're gonna do a major tightening period in 2017, there's absolutely 100% a recession coming, because there's so much real estate that's floating on debt. And by the way, the banks have started to price this in. The Libor is up from 0.3% to 1.1%. So the banks are lending within themselves at 300% more than they have in May. This is a 300% gain in interest rates between banks. This is horrible.
Yeah. Well, the banks can't trust each other at this point. That's the problem, is that the derivatives bubble is so huge. The banks are all leveraged to the hilt. And if one goes down, they all go down. And let me just flush this out. You mentioned the manipulation of silver specifically. You also mentioned inflation. And I did a video not long ago saying that Bitcoin and silver are screaming hyperinflation. So why do I say that? Well, Bitcoin is trading how silver should be trading. I believe silver should be over $1,000 right now if it were not being manipulated so severely on the COMEX and the LBMA. And why do I say that? Well, as Bix Weir told us recently, 400 million ounces of paper silver per day are traded on the COMEX with those contracts on the COMEX. What does that mean? That means every 2 days, 800 million ounces, the amount equal to all of the world's production of silver for an entire year, are traded on the COMEX in 2 days. That's up 41%, Lior, from the previous year. So that means they're having to do more paper manipulation, 41% more, just to keep silver capped at these prices. So I think that activity on the COMEX is screaming hyperinflation.
Sure. Look, the fact of the matter is the inflation has creeped up to 2.5%. But on the flip side,
official numbers, right? Because I think it's far worse. If you have to pay for health care, if you have to pay for the staples of things that we need in our lives, if you have to pay for your child's college education, some of these costs are off the charts. We're talking 15, 16, 20% per year increases, not 2%.
Sure. Well, obviously, I'm talking about the official numbers.
Right.
That's what they're working on. And on the flip side, Treasury yields have gone down. So we're basically, even at 2%, 2.5% inflation, we're still at negative territory of real interest rates. This is not going to change, even if they raise interest rates further this year. This is a zero to negative interest rate environment that we live in. And it's probably going to stay there for 5 or 6 or 7 more years. It's incredibly hard for inflation to go up and for these bonds to go up together with them. And that's very bad for the stock market, because the stock market for the last 2 or 3 years, it's been unreachable, unattainable for the average worker. It takes now 27 weeks for the average worker to buy the Dow Jones. That's an all-time high. Just for reference, Sean, 1980, when the bull market in the Dow Jones began, it was 2.5 weeks. So it takes 1,300% more weeks now for somebody to participate in the stock market if it chooses to. That means that the elite are gaining from the stock market boom, but just the elite. The average guy can't participate. Now, how has the stock market gone up so much? Well, what they do is they borrow this cheap money and they buy back shares. When you buy back shares of your own, when the CEO buys back shares of his own company, what he does is he's increasing his per share profit. That makes the company looks good, and that makes profit go up and the share price go up and bonuses, etc. Now, when interest rates go up, they don't do that. There's nothing to create good profits, but other than good management, and that's not been around. That's not been the case. There's no fundamental increase for these companies, especially when you're renegotiating all of these trade agreements. All of these companies do not know what the Donald Trump administration is going to do with regards to many things. So this environment of raising rates, which is going to deter companies from purchasing their own shares, plus this uncertainty, plus this global problem where China and Japan are dumping treasury, this is draining liquidity from this entire system, and you can easily see a drop of 10, 20, maybe even 30% in these major indices, and this is going to create a real nightmare for the entire economy. There's 150 million people in the U.S. invested in the stock market. This is more than half the country.
Well, it's a real concern, too, because as my friend Cliff High has been warning, March marks the month where chaos begins, according to the WebBot data. And I think we're already seeing chaos. Certainly we're seeing chaos as the deep state is revealed. I mean, can you imagine the chaos that's going on right now at that mansion in Washington, D.C., where the Obamas moved? You know, as he now is faced with Obamagate, as the Bush, Clinton, CIA deep state is being revealed with Vault 7. I mean, there is chaos happening right now, and we're not even referring to the economic chaos, which the webbots say is about to begin. And if the stock market bubble finally pops, you're absolutely right. It's going to be Katie bar the door. So what do you do to protect yourself in that event? I mean, it seems like right now silver at $17.50 and gold at $1,200 and change is still not loved universally by our friends, neighbors, and colleagues. They don't care. They're not paying attention. You know? So what happens when the stock market pops and we hit economic chaos? What happens when the dollar dies and we hit economic chaos? What happens to our friends, neighbors, and colleagues who don't pay attention to these types of interviews?
Well, first of all, I wrote extensively about this in my personal portfolio, and I wrote a special report detailing this entire asset allocation model for 2017 at wealthresearchgroup.com/2017, and you can go there, you can download my entire portfolio for this year. But here's the thing: diversification is not only economic anymore; it's political. If you can have your gold stored in multiple locations worldwide, do that. There's easy way to do it. Obviously, for Americans, Canada is a good choice. Panama, Switzerland, these countries where they don't even have to disclose, your purchases and your gold. It's invisible. Another way to do it is to get a second passport. It's almost like an insurance policy at this point to have a second passport. And a lot of countries make it easier on you. And you can go there, you can become a resident before you become a citizen, but obviously you can work there. This is great for retirees who can't afford retirement in the U.S., but who can live like kings in other places on the planet. I mean, there's more to life than the United States. And thirdly, and this is very important, you can have offshore real estate. There's many places where the real estate market is absolutely cheap, and it's not floating on a sea of debt, and you're getting in a hard asset, a cash flowing asset, and that's pretty much unattainable to the United States government. Even if they want to, they won't come after a property that you own halfway around the world. So those are three things. Obviously, gold, silver, and Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are an amazing tool for the average person in the 21st century to get out of this system that's paralyzed people for so many decades. In fact, in some dictatorship countries, what they're doing now with the blockchain, for instance, in places like in Africa, where a piece of land that you own has been, moving down the family for centuries, and now a dictator comes, he wants to take it over, right? Well, what they're doing right now with blockchain is they're putting your title on the property on blockchain. That's it. It's there. You cannot seize it, and it's freeing up people around the world. So it's a blessed thing, and I think copyrights and the rights of people to land, to their own creations, to their funds. That's getting away from government, and that's a great thing to look forward to. And that's something that the cryptocurrencies are in charge of.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important point. And I want to just say one last thing about Bitcoin before we lose you. You mentioned the blockchain. So one final word here about Bitcoin. Cliff High is predicting $13,000 Bitcoin. Beyond that, he's predicting skyrocketing prices in the future, moving out in the next couple of years, even beyond that price. I have been anti-Bitcoin for a long time because I'm a physical silver and gold guy, real money, honest money. I think Bitcoin is here to stay, Lior, and I am now advising people, if they have a little fun money, a little play money, buy half a Bitcoin, buy a full Bitcoin. Get some skin in the game as a lotto ticket for this new money, which appears to not be going away. And one final word on Bitcoin. We've got the Winklevoss twins. You guys would know them from their involvement early on in Facebook, and they had to sue Mark Zuckerberg because he essentially, I think, defrauded them or stole their idea. And I think they settled for $60 million, something like that. The Winklevoss twins are working on a Bitcoin ETF, which is said to be on the cusp of either being approved or not approved in perhaps the next day or two. So if it is approved, I think we could see Bitcoin go to 3,000 in short order. And if it is not approved, we'll see a big correction in Bitcoin, which will be a extremely good buying opportunity for anybody who doesn't have any or anybody who wants to add more.
Well, Sean, obviously, I think the blockchain and Bitcoin and many other cryptocurrencies that are going to come around the next few years to compete with Bitcoin, obviously competition will be a great idea for this industry. And no, I don't think it's going away. In fact, I think it's a very legitimate way of transacting. It saves so much. It saves counterfeiting. Counterfeiting is a huge problem in the world. There's about 500 billion counterfeit notes going around annually. It saves time for things to move around the world, and it saves all the middlemen. The fees are insane. When you use banks, the fees for wiring are ridiculous. When you use Western Union or all of these things that the third world countries are using, it's even more ridiculous. It's like 10-15%, and you have to go to the branch, and it takes 3 days. Blockchain and cryptocurrencies are definitely going to stick around, and if somebody figures out how to involve this with gold and silver to back this up, it's going to be an amazing tool as well. So, in my opinion, I don't like predicting the prices of these things because obviously they're so new. And I had friends calling me up when Bitcoin was $3 and $7 to get in way early. So I'm just letting you know it's very hard to predict these things, but they're definitely going to stick around. What will be very interesting is Bitcoin companies, true public traded companies. Until now, I've researched for the last 6 months. A lot of them, I can't find anything that's very legitimate and interesting, but they're definitely going to come around. Obviously, like gold and silver mining companies are much more explosive than gold and silver, the commodities. These stocks will be explosive as well. And I've written a special report because I knew you're going to ask me about this for your listeners about how to combine your safe haven assets in multiple locations, gold, silver, and Bitcoin at wealthresearchgroup.com/safe havens, because I think it's a powerful combination of the three. And another chaos edge that we haven't spoken on the show, and I have put it in the special report, is a very important thing for any saver, not even an investor.
All right, excellent. Guys, our guest has been Lior Gantz, the founder of Wealth Research Group. Lior, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, John.
All right, and guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I've never asked for a donation, ever, and we've never accepted donations or had a donate button, but I do now have a Bitcoin address for anybody that would be inclined to want to show us a little bit of love, and I'll post that Bitcoin address below this video in the more information section. So thanks so much for tuning in. We appreciate your support at sgtreport.com, thephaser.com, and check us out at thelibertymill.com for real news 24/7. All right, thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.